Many thanks, Kerstin, and thank you so much for this wonderful introduction and also welcoming us all. Also on my behalf, everyone tuning in right now and also listening it afterwards, welcome. And we're all hoping that you're gonna get inspired, learn something new, but especially that we will be able to dive into an interesting discussion on what can we do better to secure a sustainable fashion industry. I would like to start on a note with the developments from this morning, actually. So yesterday, some of you probably caught that there was a letter written by over 150 business leaders and also investors that was sent to the European Union, urging all the different European Union countries to strengthen their climate goals to reach by the year 2030. And just this morning, the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, was addressing her very first union address as the president. And she included this proposal to increase 2030 emission reduction to at least 55%. It's important to realize there was 40% before. And now, of course, we know that we will need to switch to renewable energy. However, a big part is really responsible also for extraction of the resources, production and creation of the waste and overconsumption. So today we are going to dive a little bit deeper into what can change within the fashion industry, which according to World Bank is responsible for approximately 10% of the greenhouse gas emissions. And just to find a little bit more about who do we have dialing in today, we would like to see and understand where are you from? Hence our very first poll question. Please just choose whichever is the most suitable and most accurate for your situation at the moment. Maybe a few more seconds, and then we can have a look on what are the results. Fantastic. Okay, so majority of people is really watching right now from the Netherlands. Approximately 1/3 is dialing in from all the different countries in the Nordics. 15% is from Europe. Assumption is, of course, that they're outside of the Netherlands or the Nordics. And then we even have 12% of people watching us from outside of the Europe. Amazing. And now let's have a look at talking sustainable fashion and business transformation. What is actually keeping you busy on a daily basis? Can you share with us, like, what's the field of work that you're busy with nowadays? So we have one more poll question for you, and then we will dive into conversations and panel discussion. So the first option is fashion, either fast or sustainable. So anything within fashion. The second option is sustainability, not necessarily within the fashion industry directly. And the last one is something outside of sustainability, outside of fashion, but you're still very interested in this topic. And now let's have a look. What is the results? Oh, fantastic. So we got almost half of the people dialing in because you are truly interested in the topic. Approximately 1/4 is working directly in a fashion, and approximately 1/4 is working in a field of sustainability, not necessarily in a fashion. That's a really nice split. Thank you so much. And now talking about sustainable fashion and fashion business transformation, we're very excited to have on board a person who is just the right one to give us a little bit of context why we need sustainable fashion, what it is, what are the business models, and how can we achieve this transition. So we're having with us Kim Paltner, who is a circular business professor at the University of Applied Sciences in Den Haag. Before she was working at the University of Wageningen, she's also the founder of the Circular Labs and the one who was working also on the online course teaching us about circular fashion business models. Kim, you have over 15 years of experience within the field. You studied it, you were an entrepreneur yourself in the field, you were a model yourself as well. And yeah, right now, you are a professor having all the other insights. So great to have you on board. Welcome.
Thank you.
And yeah, I would like to understand, how did you actually get into that field?
Okay, so 20 years ago, I started as a fashion design student at AMFI in Amsterdam, the Amsterdam Management Fashion Institute. And I was just totally fascinated by fashion, but I soon found out that the industry was not very sustainable. So that really broke my heart. And that made me venture into starting my first eco-fashion enterprise in 2005. This was a shop in Amsterdam selling only eco-fashion brands. And at the time, it was just a handful of sustainable fashion brands that you could find in the world. So we were happy to have them in the store. And well, that evolved into several other businesses, amongst them in 2008, Eco Fashion World, an online platform mainly catering for the North American market. By then, 2008, there were already so many more sustainable fashion brands in the world. And that was also the time that I got the privilege to embark on a PhD study. So I had the chance to travel around the world and meet sustainable fashion entrepreneurs from different countries and interview them and follow them over a longer period of time. And in the end, I wrote my PhD on this topic. So really sustainable fashion entrepreneurship is, at the core of who I am and what I study and what I also develop education on. So fast forward, yes, you already mentioned the Circular Fashion Lab at Wageningen University and Research, where we mainly focus on novel materials like bio-based materials like mycelium, for example, algae, and all these types of innovations, and also fiber innovations. And right now, I'm actually at the Hague University of Applied Sciences, and we're currently developing another research project around circular retail, because we noticed that it's wonderful when there are a lot of sustainable fashion brands out there, but if retailers don't manage to properly sell these brands, the consumers can still not access those brands. So that's my latest venture.
Fantastic. Many thanks. So can you tell us what is sustainable fashion and why do we need it?
Yeah, well, at the time of developing Eco Fashion World, this platform, I sort of made an definition to talk about sustainable fashion. I think there are many different interpretations, but for me, there are 4 key elements to it. And the first is that it's socially fair, so no child labor, fair trade legislations and stuff like that. The second has the ecological impact, so it's without polluting the environment. It's, organic cotton farming and things like that are important there. Then the third is really transparency in the supply chain. So how can we make sure that it's a transparent chain? And of course, there are many beautiful tools available nowadays to be able to track all the way back in the chain and, for example, find out who the cotton farmer was who made the cotton for your shirt. And the fourth and final element that I highly value is what I call in French the savoir-faire. So what we see, of course, in fashion is a lot of mainstream, mass-consumed fashion production. And well, I should have maybe become an anthropologist. I love the different communities and the different cultural heritage from around the world. So the handicraft of different people around the world. I've also worked with different communities. So I'm thinking about weaving, I'm thinking about certain ways of dyeing textiles, I'm thinking about embroidery and those types of handicrafts. So that is also very much, I think, part of the conversation, or should be part of the conversation. And let alone, I mean, this was my definition for sustainable fashion. When I think now about circular fashion, which is of course a more recent discourse that we're having, then all those other elements come into play, like, for example, the bio-based materials that I mentioned earlier.
Very well, thank you so much. You were talking also that indeed the current business model is a little bit of broken model because we have the overconsumption, we have a lot of pollution, we have a lot of resources that are being wasted. In fact, it's not only waste of time and value of those people working on it, it's a waste of money as well. Ellen MacArthur Foundation evaluated it that it's worth annually every single year more than 400 billion euros. So what can circular economy do over here? How can we really nicely imply it and transform from the current business model to a more circular one?
Well, I'm with one eye looking at the chat function, and I see already some people that are saying how wonderful it is that Corona has invited us to do much more online conferencing. So, you know, there's definitely a lot of downsides to the COVID-19 pandemic, but I think this is one of them because last year, for example, there was a conference that I attended, a fashion conference, and one of the keynote speakers had purposefully said, "I'm not flying from New York to Amsterdam," but now this is common practice. So see how much can change. So what are sorry again your question?
How can we transition from the current business models to more circular ones? And what are those circular business models?
Yeah, exactly. So how we can transition is when pandemics like these strike and we're forced to organize in a different way. For example, organizing conferences online. The fashion model of the future, I think, can entail many different aspects to it, you know. So I, for example, myself, am fascinated by the whole digitalization in fashion. So when we're looking at the work of the Fabricant, a fashion design house based in Amsterdam, I mean, their business is flourishing thanks to Corona because, you know, brands suddenly, you know, want to do digital sampling and organize a digital showroom and really reorganize their fashion supply chain. So I think that is definitely has a lot of potential to disrupt the chains as we know them today. But then also, for example, of course, those bio-based materials, I mean, we're used to shipping textiles and then later on clothing around the globe. But when we're looking at these new types of bio-based materials, we're able to grow them in our own bathtubs, in some cases, when we're looking at kombucha, for example, and then mold it around our bodies, wear it a couple of times, and then throw it in the compost bin. So, you know, that is another way of looking what the future could be like.
Sounds really, really great. Yeah, really curious, but we will get it. Overall, what would you say? What is the future of sustainable fashion? Where are you seeing fashion going, let's say, in the next 10 years? Everyone's talking about this magical year 2030, 10 years to go. How do you see that, Kim?
Well, I mean, I'm very grateful and delighted to see that there's so much progress that has been made. I mean, we have some wonderful companies also in the panel later on that have really made an incredible positive mark on the fashion industry. And I'm sure they'll share what they've done later on. So there is a lot of progress that has been made. There's still a lot of work that also needs to be done. And I think things cannot go fast enough because there is certainly this urgency of making a change as soon as we can to try to avoid doom scenarios, right? So when I'm thinking about the policy program that has been published earlier this year, for example, here in the Netherlands, from our Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. The focus there is, for example, on extended producer responsibility. So really at the beginning of the supply chain, give producers the responsibility to maintain, for example, owner of the resources they use. So don't put that ownership with a consumer, for example. But also raising awareness amongst consumers. So they're developing a communication campaign at the moment for the Dutch consumer to become more aware of sustainable fashion. And at the end of the supply chain, we have a lot of efforts going into the whole recycling part.
Thank you.
I think those things are very important. It's very good to see that the Dutch government is taking leadership in this landscape. And as a consumer, well, you'll talk more about that next week, I think. The first thing to do is just to stop buying new fashion, I think.
That's a perfect advice, and something all of us can really reconsider and take at least some small steps over there to stop the overconsumption. That's the current state of mind. And also very happy that you were talking about the initiatives that the governments are taking, because indeed this is exactly what we will be talking in a third webinar. And on top of the fact that we'll be diving also into this initiative of the Dutch government, we're going to have also statements from the Nordic ambassador. So stay tuned and looking forward to learn more on this topic in our webinar number 3. Now, Kim, you got a chance to really work also abroad. You got a chance to work with all the different designers and entrepreneurs in fashion, as you mentioned, also outside of Europe. So are there perhaps some good examples that you would like to highlight as the ones doing something right, and definitely that can be labeled as a sustainable fashion brands?
Yes, absolutely. It's good that I'm not working internationally anymore so much, because I also want to reduce my own footprint. So I'm trying to make a more local community impact at the moment. But there are some wonderful examples abroad, of course. Too many to mention. Well, one that comes to mind is Rags to Riches. In the Philippines, if I'm not mistaken. So they make with communities in that area. They make from rags, literally. They make new products. So they recycle discarded textiles. When I was living in Brazil for some time, I used to work with an organization called Moda Fusion. They are now called actually Casa Geração in Portuguese. But they also work with local communities, preserving that savoir-faire, so these traditional embroidery techniques called fushiko, and making them into really state-of-the-art fashion that can be sold in, for example, La Redoute, this department store in Paris. So those are 2 examples. But I mean, a brand like People Tree, for example, has established a model of working with communities around the globe. So there are amazing examples. One of them is also Avery, a German Moroccan-based brand that makes wonderful bags, for example, leather bags. So I mean, it's such a wealth of inspiration out there, I think.
Super. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights. And just on a note, we didn't mention it yet, but when the 2 of us were talking, you also mentioned that there is a big, exciting thing ahead of you, and that was opening a pop-up store. Can you maybe walk us through that, what it and how it works?
Yes, this is really me and how my life unfolds. Yes, so I mean, I'm my main job, my main profession right now is to be a professor, right? So I'm doing a lot of research, and I'm trying to innovate education to inspire new generations makers to make impact on the planet, specifically in the field of sustainable fashion. But Corona has also forced me to work from home and to rethink what I can do maybe in my local community, because I cannot travel to my job an hour from every day anymore. So I have totally improvised, opened a local pop-up shop last week in my own area, where we're trying, well, I see it as a living research lab, basically. So I try to be there just on the work floor, trying to sell stuff to people. But we're not just selling vintage and secondhand clothes. We're trying to also experiment with the rental model and with the swap model. So people can buy, borrow, and swap their clothes. And we already got some media attention, so it's been a flying start. And for me, it's really seeing if this business model, or which business model, works out in the best way possible. If we can make community impact, so our ambition is to become the walk-in closet for the area where we're living in. And if it's a viable business model, we can look for a physical location after December. So Fantastic. It's very exciting because it's, it also, brings me back to my own community. So that's cool.
Many thanks and big congratulations. Looking forward to hearing more about that and all your beautiful sustainable fashion endeavors. So Kim, thank you so much. And also, indeed, keeping an eye on what's happening in our chat box. So those people who are outside of the Netherlands and outside of the Nordics were kind enough to really jot down like where they're all from. And it's a really combination, it's really international, anything from Australia, Brazil, Colombia, Japan, India, Greece, Germany, Estonia, Scotland. So it's absolutely amazing to see that the audience is truly international, and absolutely, this is one of the beautiful proofs that when we have to change, we're capable of doing that. Kim, thank you so much. And right now, I would like to join to further discuss the business transformation and hearing about their point of view on sustainable fashion, what can we do, and also share their insights. Four representatives: Annette Venstra from H&M. We got also Lotta Kopra representing Spinova. We got Sigmund Hekstad from Fair and Square. And we got Signe Rodebro from Brand by Signe. And it's beautifully 5 of us. Perfect, great to see. And indeed, I just want to say that every single one of you is representing a different brand, and different brand also representing different countries. So let me just very quickly give you also an insight who is going to join the discussion. We got Lotta Kopra, who's representing Finland in company Spinova. Lotta is the Chief Commercial Officer, and Spinova is actually having this amazing, innovative cellulose and waste stream textile fiber called Spinova, the most sustainable one in the whole world so far, and working hard on it to scale it up. So looking forward to having you on board, Lotte.
Thanks, Andrea.
Welcome. We got Sigmund Hekstad representing Fair and Square and also representing Norway. And Sigmund is actually originally a dancer, but then he got also involved into fashion, thinking how can we really prove that it can be done in a fair way. And Sigmund is even proving that having a factory in China can be done sustainably with really great conditions for the workers. And looking forward to hearing more from you, Sigmund. Welcome. We got Signe Rodebro, and Signe has her own brand by Signe. It's a Danish brand, so representing Denmark. And Signe is actually one of the first brands that started already over 5 years ago. And it was originally having this idea, let's do fashion differently. Let's do it with a consciousness in mind. And Signe, last time we talked, you were actually sitting in your oven factory as well, and very curious to hear all your thoughts on sustainable fashion as well. Welcome.
Thank you.
And last and definitely not least, we got Annette Venstra, who is a sustainability manager from H&M. And indeed, it's quite interesting to have a big brand that's absolutely available worldwide with us as well. And H&M has some really fantastic goals in terms of circularity and sustainability. You are working very closely also with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation to figure out how to do all this vast clothes production more circular. And many, many goals, trying different business models in different countries. We'll get to that later. But I just want to say for now, big welcome, Annette. I would also like to ask all 4 of you if you could please unmute yourself, because this is the time when we're really gonna dive into a conversation. So Signe unmuted, Sigmund unmuted, Annette and Lotta, please if you could unmute yourself as well. Annette, thank you, you're unmuted, and Lotta. I can see you still as fantastic. All good and great to go right now. So welcome to this discussion. And indeed, our focus today is talking about business transformation. So first, very obvious question. What does sustainable fashion mean to you? Who would like to start? Sigmund, how about you? What is sustainable fashion to you?
I think it's difficult to define like concretely and shortly what sustainable fashion is. I think what we got from Kim was a good list and good good starting point. I think the difficult part is that I know for our brand, and I assume for most brands, we will not be like, we can't check up that we are 100% socially fair. We're 100% in control of our environmental footprint. We are 100% transparent. So that in a way it becomes a question, where is the line between, like, when do you cross the line into sustainable fashion and when are you still not sustainable enough? I know for our brand, we focused, like, our starting point was fairness and good working conditions. And to me, in a way, good working conditions is very simple, because we made a definition of what we define as good working conditions. We have 37.5 hours work week. We have paid vacation, paid maternity leave, paid sick leave, very similar to what we have in all the Nordic countries in terms of workers' rights. And then from there we saw, okay, what is the price of producing a t-shirt, and then what do we have to sell it for? But when it comes to environment, there is always new information coming out. A lot of the really good, impactful things, it costs a lot more than what we would be able to afford starting off. So we made the choice of focusing on the working conditions.
Super. Many thanks for your insights. Lotte, how about you? Yeah, what does sustainability mean for Spinnova? Please go ahead.
Thanks. I'm happy to continue after Stephen. So, so firstly, Spinnova, we are a sustainable material company. Our product is to produce sustainable fibers, yarns, and ready fabrics for the textile industry, for example, fashion industry. And I also like Kim's idea of the 4 different areas of sustainable fashion, and our chosen path has been to make the best way possible in the materials, and their first focus in environment. Also in social regard, it's very easy because we don't have, for example, the cotton farm, the challenges related to cotton farming. But anyways, so that's where we try to make the impact we can. And what's different, what do we do differently, is that we use 0 harmful chemicals and we use very minimum water. So for example, in comparison to cotton production, we use 99% less water than the cotton production. And all these things considered, then it makes our greenhouse gases or our CO2s the lowest in the industry today. But so this is our cup of tea.
Great. So we get working conditions, going into materials. Signe and Annette, how about you? How do you perceive sustainable fashion? What does it mean to you?
Can you see me? Because there was something going on with the camera, but can you still hear me?
Is that Signe talking?
No.
No? Annette? Annette?
Yes.
Fantastic. We froze for a little while, but now we can hear you and we can see you perfectly. Please.
Yes. Yes, I just wanted to clarify. I'm the sustainability manager for H&M Netherlands. So I'm part of a group of over 250 colleagues all over the globe working specifically on sustainability. But what does sustainable fashion mean for us? Well, we think as the H&M group, you have to look at the whole spectrum. So see how you can change the way fashion is produced, but also used and reused. And what's super important for us is also that sustainable fashion is available and affordable for as many people as possible. And of course, we have the reach to with all our stores and online platforms to reach a lot of people in what we do. And yes, we have a lot of goals, as you said, on the materials, on the social side of the fashion industry, but also to inform and engage our customers all over the world to treat their garments differently, to prolong the lifespan of garments, and to make sure that they enjoy it as long as they can, because that's also a big part of sustainability. And if you do not want to have it the garment anymore, then there are so many other ways to make sure that someone else is still very happy with your fashion favorite. So that's super short, because I can talk, of course, for hours on what we do, but maybe you can come back with specific questions to me later on.
And I certainly will, Annette. Many thanks. And Signe, how about you? What does sustainable fashion mean to you?
I think very good descriptions have been given already, but one of the things close to my heart is, like Sigmund mentioned also, that when I started five years ago, sustainable materials were difficult to find, but they were somehow available. And I wanted to cover everything from the beginning, and I found that I could purchase organic fabrics, but finding a socially sustainable manufacturing was almost impossible. Therefore, at the time, I set up an atelier in Denmark, because I felt that when we care about the environment and the planet, we have to also care about all the, large amount of people involved in the process. And as you briefly mentioned, last year we upscaled this production and started a factory in Turkey built on European principles about social sustainability.
Fantastic. I would just like to add that it's called Moon Textile, right? And
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more, like what is different now working with the European principles compared to what it has been before?
In Turkey.
Yes.
So there are many ways that we can make a difference here. When I had my atelier in Denmark, I was creating jobs, and they were good jobs, but they were not jobs that were way better than the normal jobs, because, let's be honest, all jobs in Denmark are pretty good. In Turkey, it's very easy to make big differences and small differences. So of course, an easy thing to mention is the fact that we pay a lot more than we have to. Smaller differences can be the fact that they are allowed to look out the window, that they have access to windows while working, that they have Saturdays off, that they have a padded chair to sit on, that they are eating as much food as they want in the break times. So we are really working with big and small parameters in making direct changes to the lives of our workers.
Fantastic. Many thanks for sharing. Lotta, I would like to go back to you, and I would like to ask you actually, talking about the most sustainable fiber, why it's not yet available globally, or like what would help you to further scale it up and make it available literally to everyone who's interested in it? Lotta, sorry, you're on mute. Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So thanks for the question. It's a good one. And I get this quite a lot. So why is innovation so slow? Why is it taking so long? And looking from the inside, it doesn't seem slow to me, but maybe to open it up a little bit. So one thing is that big brands, they have, let's say, 1.5 year or 2 year timeline from design to then having commercial big launches out. Is a regular timeline. Then in addition to that is we do material innovation. So not only apparels and all that, but also on material level with the brands. So that then takes extra time. So we have this joint development projects with brands. And then a third thing to consider is that this is a young innovation and a young company. So we always say that this innovation was invented 10 years ago. The company is 5 years old, but our product is even more younger. So our fiber product was only sort of frozen. What are the features? What are the blends? All this only 7-8 months back. And only now we have, since summer, we have commercially ready fabrics for the brands. So that's why it just takes very long to have this disruptive innovation to bring it to a huge and very traditional industry like the textile industry. So it takes time. We try to be quicker, and I personally think that the brands and the major players of the industry have been very responsive. Just all of this does take a little bit of time. But now we are actually very close. So we are planning to have our very first commercial line, very small one, but the first commercial one out this year with a brand.
Super, many thanks. And yeah, let me turn to Annette. Annette, so indeed you're representing H&M, and there have been some major announcements in terms of your sustainability strategy just those last days. Can you maybe tell us a little bit more what's happening? What is the idea there?
Are you referring to a specific announcement? Because we publish a lot. So maybe you can specify a bit.
Yeah, so right now on your website, it's popped up that you're really aiming for better materials, for cleaner materials, for utilizing also the circularity business models. So there was a collection launched that actually is, let's say, 100% recycled polyester made. And it has specified also that it's, let's say, 50% post-consumer polyester, 50% pre-consumer waste recycled polyester. So can you maybe give us a little bit of an idea, where is the current sustainability strategy heading?
Well, if you are referring to the materials, so all of the products that we offer, which is not only garments, but also cosmetics and home products, so interior, we have a goal to have 100% sustainable or recycled materials by 2030. So, and of course, we are keeping track of what we do every year, and I only can share the official figure of 2019, which is that at the moment we are at 57% of the materials that we use are either sustainable, more sustainable, or recycled materials. And the campaign that's running now is called Made to Last. And yes, it is for a big part recycled polyester, but we are launching different materials all the time. So it's the ones that we use on a big scale, like the recycled polyester or the several sustainable cottons, also very new materials. So we are innovating a lot, sometimes by investing in companies, sometimes supporting companies. We have our own innovation lab. So usually we try out new materials on a smaller scale just to see, well, of course, if customers like it, but also how is it to work with it and also to develop with suppliers. And then, if possible, we try to scale up as soon as possible to also have them in our regular collections. Yeah, so 57, it's okay, but we have to speed up, of course, if we want to reach the goal. And the larger part of that 57% is cotton, which is now the only thing we use is sustainable or recycled cotton. So that's already at 100%. But now it's becoming a bit more challenging to see what materials are available already there and what still needs to be developed, also from existing textiles.
Yeah, so you mentioned also, Annette, that you wish it could go faster. And of course, you also mentioned that you're having this goal by year 2030, which is 10 years from now. So just really curious, what would help you as H&M to speed this up? Because of course, we're also aware that if a company that has such a global scale and outreach, such as H&M, is capable of changing something for something more positive, then the impact is just absolutely tremendous. So what do you need? What could help you to speed this transition up?
Well, unfortunately, it's also a matter of time. It is time to make sure that the new materials that are developed are also able to be produced in plants. We just need new plants. We also need a totally new circular supply chain, and that's not possible from one day on the other. And a big part of materials, what I already mentioned, should also come from recyclability. So the garments that are out there should all come back to us, or not specifically us as a company, but to the supply chain. And if you need a much easier fiber identification or a materials passport to know what's in the garment, the existing garment, and also to know is it recyclable or recirculable. And of course, us as a company, we do have a lot of things also still to develop ourselves. So the circular design, for instance, that we are really working on with all our designers and product developers.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, very, very clear. So in terms of materials, you really need some more time to develop and test it, that these are the right ones to be able to reach this target. Now I would like to ask actually you, Signe and Sigmund. So both of you are representing companies that are very keen and making it very clear that owning a factory is also the way to go. And both of you are working very closely with your suppliers. Signe, your brand started over 5 years ago. Sigmund, your brand is relatively new. What would help you to scale it up and help you grow?
Me? Yeah, I mean, in terms of the textile industry, we're a tiny little company. But I mean, what we need in order to be able to is to sell more. So we need to be, focused on marketing, all of those things, let's say, that H&M is really, really good at. So we probably need some of the talent that now works at H&M to come work for us instead. I do also want to add a short point about maybe sustainability and how that works, like environmental sustainability and how that works with ethical production, because ethical production is more expensive than like bad, cheap production. For example, for us to produce a t-shirt, it costs more than what H&M is selling the t-shirt for. So I think the biggest impact that our ethical production has on the environment is that the consumers can't afford as many t-shirts from us as from a fast fashion brand. And I think the biggest impact on the environment in terms of the fashion industry is reducing the total consumption of garments. So sustainable, environmental, and ethical, it works actually very well hand in hand.
You're touching interesting points, because indeed it should be about quality over quantity, and we need to also change the current way we're consuming. So many thanks for sharing your points. Signe, what is your take on this one?
On growing?
Yeah, where do you see yourself? What would help you to grow? What is the idea?
Well, I have two sides. I have the brand side and the factory side. For the factory side, to develop this concept, we need more customers. We need more brands to produce with us. We have a good range already, but of course, the more customers the factory has, the more workplaces we can create. So that's a really simple to that one. For my brand, it has a very organic growth. I made a decision of a complete transparency, and also in the way that I will never want to buy anyone's opinion, which means I have never paid for anything. That means collaborations or any PR or advertising anywhere. So taking that into consideration, I think my brand has a very organic and healthy growth on its own.
Mm-hmm. I just want to clarify. So you just said that you are not only having your own brand, but you're actually even producing for different brands that are interested in organic and sustainable production, right?
Yes. When I had my atelier in Denmark, I really had just the capacity for my own brand. And I was often contacted by other brands, not only startups, but also already running brands. And they were asking if I could produce for them. And in Denmark, it was impossible. But starting the factory in Turkey, that gave me the opportunity to offer this production to like-minded brands who have the same interest. Yeah.
Perfect. So understanding what you're saying, you would like more brands to actually join forces with you and produce and utilize the experience you have with sustainable and fair production to produce that way as well, right?
Of course, it's important that they are like-minded brands, that there's no competition in between them, that we can have a close relationship developing this project together. But like I said, obviously, the more we are producing, the more workplaces we can create, the more workers we can take on board. So of course, it's a concept that we would like to develop.
Fantastic. And just like on a broader scale, this is a question to all four of you, and then we're actually getting some very interesting question also from the audience. But what is your vision? Where do you see yourself and your brand, let's say, in 5 years? What would you like to achieve? In any order, whoever feels like just very quickly sharing their vision, their mission, very briefly.
I can start.
Please, Lotta.
So firstly, I liked, was it Sigmund who shared how much the fashion consumption is growing. So now, if I think the figures are such that in 15 years of time, the volume-based usage and purchase of apparel has doubled in volume. So everybody buys about the double amount of or volume of apparel than 15 years back, and that's quite rapid. And now, if you think about the fresh water consumption and the energy consumption and so on, that follow that, I think plus 50% water consumption, 2/3 increase in energy consumption, and so on and so forth. That is not in line with the environmental global milestones we have. So how we see it as Spinnova is that now consumers seem to share the values for greener industry, but they aren't yet at least taking action. So we feel it's the industry's responsibility to take action. Mm-hmm. So like Kim mentioned, circularity, for example, can happen on 2 levels. One is material level and another one is business model level. And we are working on the material level. So now that we have this new regulation, for example, that's starting from 23, that I think Annette from H&M mentioned, brands and retailers start to take in textile waste, then I think that it pushes the industry to figure out new options, new ways of dealing with that. And for us, our materials are circularity ready. So this is how we try to help the big brands to have good tools to go towards their targets, like Annette mentioned, that the brands have really I think bold and great targets in the area of sustainability.
Many thanks for sharing. I really like that. Circularity at 2 different levels, business models, but also materials. Sigmund, Annette, would you like to add to that? What is your vision? Like, what is really where you see your company going within 5 years? What will change?
Maybe I can add something else to what Lotta said.
Sure, go ahead,
because there are so many aspects to having a long-lasting garment. Design is one of them and materials is another one. And one thing is the material being able to be recycled, but we have to also, as designers and companies, choose wisely from the beginning to choose a material that will last, hopefully, for more than a few wears. For example, so when I'm in Turkey and involved in the factory, I'm meeting with the fabric producers, also of H&M, Zara, and bigger chains. And sometimes they are extremely proud of what they can make in terms of fashion aspects of textiles. And it can be that they take an organic cotton piece and then they make a surface treatment. This surface treatment can make it shiny or water repellent or I don't know, whatever effects. I'm a minimalist, I'm not working so much with that. And when I'm asking them, but how would this work when you start washing it? And they are already aware at this stage that this surface treatment will last for 1 or 2 washings. That means we're choosing a fabric and well knowing that even after manufacturing through hands and people and hours and all the steps of the process, after the consumer washes this 1 or 2 times, it's ready to throw or to be recycled.
Thank you for your input, Signe. Annette, just because H&M has been mentioned here, would you like to comment on that? The long-lasting materials.
Sure, but that is part of what I already said, that circular design is super important, that everyone is aware of the choices that you make, the impact, but also how durable a garment will be, of course. But if you ask me what I expect to see in the coming 5 years are super exciting new innovations that are coming up. We see them. We see a lot of very good things going on with great potential, and a lot of collaborations with NGOs and with other brands, because I think all of us, even though you are a big brand like H&M Group, you can't do it alone. So I think beyond competition, we will see a lot of cooperation also on fashion brand sites. But also adapting to a lot of new regulations that are coming up. And I think H&M Group is more than ready to comply. So yeah, that's what I see. A lot of innovations, cooperations going on in the next years that will hopefully also see breakthroughs for the whole industry.
Thanks, Annette. So indeed, hopefully only the garments that are really durable and of great quality will be kept, so they can really extend their life cycle and can be used more, because we know that end of the product's use is not necessarily end of the product's life. And this is also where the circular business models are actually coming in handy. And for instance, one of the business models that's been mentioned also by Kim is the rental. So in order to rent the garments to all the different people that are utilizing this garment typically more efficiently than one person owning this garment, we need a great quality. We need materials that after the wash still look like new, and that people want to wear them. Also, Signe, to your point, like it has to be something that's not looking worn out like after 2 wears. And Annette, also H&M is actually playing around already with all those different business models. In fact, we know that in Stockholm there's already this rental pilot going on. Can you maybe tell us a little bit more? How is that working and what do you see so far?
Yes, well, that's of course for us in the other countries also super interesting, because we can't wait to also introduce it in our countries. But unfortunately, of course, we have now the COVID-19 situation, and that means that it's really hard to see if the pilot is successful or not, because we see, of course, less people coming to the store. But what is also significant is that we see that in our own systems, we need to develop on all kinds of departments that are not visible for customers to make this a success. This and other new business models like repaired garments back in the stores, or remake initiatives like we did in the Netherlands with the designers from Hackbuy. They made new garments out of our already existing collections. And then I'm referring to, for instance, accounting, logistics, IT. It's not visible for anyone outside the company, but this is where we need to develop to make sure that these new business models are a success.
Yeah, I think all of us are really waiting with big open eyes and curious minds to see how this will work. Because again, if such a big giant within fashion industry as H&M can figure this out, and we can learn what were the lessons behind piloting the business model and scale it up, that would be absolutely beautiful and definitely, ideally, help us also with the overconsumption. Sigmund, I actually skipped you, but not on purpose. I was really curious. You made it also very clear that your goal is not to be necessarily like a global brand. You created your brand to raise the awareness and also as a proof of concept that this is actually possible to be done in a way you're doing this. Can you tell us a little bit more, like where do you see Fair and Square going in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think our setup is quite similar to Signes actually, where we both have our own brand, but we also have our own production. And for us, our main goal for growth is the production part. We would rather produce for a lot more brands in an ethical way than necessarily to sell our own brand. We created our brand out of necessity actually, because ethical production in many ways the same as other production, just more expensive. We knew that we actually had also to take responsibility for selling the clothing. So where we want to grow the most is this actually similar to Signe in the production aspect. So we want more and more brands to choose that way of production. And then as we grow, we will also be able to improve a lot on the environmental parts. The parts that needs bigger investments will be able to also offer.
Many thanks for pointing this out, Sigmund. So pretty much like the goal is also to be a greener, better, more sustainable and more fair options for brands that are trying to figure out this sustainable supply chain and the big maze that is currently happening in the whole world.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that, because H&M had the goal to have living wages in their supply chain by 2018. And then, at least in Norway, when it didn't happen, H&M went out in the media and said it's too difficult. It's not, we have tried, but it turns out nobody is able to do this. And then I would like to say that it is possible. We are doing it, and we can really, I mean, one, we could produce for H&M if they would like to take that route. And the other is, if not, we would love to help H&M to be able to get there. And I can promise I will be able to make living wages in all of H&M's clothing within 5 years if you let me come on board. Because it is possible. You just have to decide what is the acceptable conditions that you will have in your factories. And then you actually have to produce and own factories yourself, because then you can control it.
Many thanks for the generous offer, Sigmund. I wonder, Anna, if you want to comment on that, or whether we can move to the next question that's actually super close to this topic, and that's the pricing. Because very often we see that the sustainable clothes are more expensive. Very often all the different consumer results are coming back that people are willing to pay more for sustainable clothes. But in reality, we see something different. And there were also quite some questions that were touching the topic of the pricing. Does it mean that when something is more expensive, that more money can go to those factories and ideally directly to the pockets of the garment workers? Or how can we determine what's the right price for products that are more sustainable and fair? And this is indeed a question to all four of you.
Yes, but you want me to react first, right?
If you feel like it, Anna, I do believe you can also merge it with this question. Please.
Yeah, no, but I would like to react, of course, a bit to what Sigmund said, because it's not like we've done nothing. We have done quite a lot. And on the part of fair wages or living wages, we are cooperating, for instance, with unions like Industrio. And what we have done in 5 years is the basis of what we see is needed to make sure that there are collective bargain agreements, and that is issuing worker representative committees, and also enrolling the wage system in a lot of our factories. But when I say our factories, it's of course not that we own them, but we share them with a lot of other companies. So that was a big learning after 5 years of living wage strategy from our side, that we do need to cooperate with other brands that are also buyers in the factories that are our suppliers. So I also want to mention that there is a partnership which is called ACT. A lot of big brands are part of that. And one big thing is that the labor costs are non-negotiable. So you can have negotiations about prices on every part of the production, but not on the labor costs, for instance. And when you say pricing, I think in a lot of cases, the price that the consumer is paying in a store is has nothing to do with the conditions that a product is made under, or the price that was bought by the retailer. Of course, we have our own organization. We do almost everything ourselves. We have our own store. We set our own margin. There are not so many people or parties in between that also have to earn something about the product, and which can make up the price. But if you say are products more expensive if they are made with sustainable materials, I don't think so. It depends, of course, on the material and how much it is available in larger amounts. But if you see in our collections, you can see not so much price difference between, for instance, a more sustainable material, and sometimes it is, because it is like tencel items are usually a bit more expensive than cotton items.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if this explains a little bit how our pricing is made up.
Definitely more clear for me. Sigmund, are you right with the question? With the answer to your question?
With pricing?
Your offer?
Well, I think, first of all, if we have to define what we mean by good working conditions, because if we talk about the conditions and the standard that we have at our factory, it's not possible to sell clothing at the lowest prices. I mean, H&M sells at a lot of different prices, but it's not possible to sell those cheapest items with our standard. It's the same. I mean, if, of course, good working conditions cost more than bad working conditions. The most expensive part is to cut the working hours by more than half in terms of what's common in the textile industry. And that costs a huge amount of money. So this will have an effect on the price out to the customer. It's not possible to make cheap fashion with good working conditions.
I would just like to say here also one thing. It's very important to keep in mind that very often it also depends on what is the scale. Probably the price is very different when we're doing a small batch, and it's a specific batch, and when we have something mass produced, because then of course there are economies of scale that can be applied. But many thanks for your point, Sigmund. Yeah.
And can I add something, because speaking of working conditions, I'm sorry to interrupt, but all our suppliers have to, of course, agree and sign and live up to a sustainability commitment, which is a very broad document of all kinds of ground rules that they have to admit to. And it's not easy to become a supplier for H&M. This is quite an extensive procedure before you are allowed to produce for H&M. And then we have 21 production offices in the countries where our products are made. So we have a very close contact with our suppliers. So we know who they are. We work closely together with them. So I think that's very important to mention, that it's not somewhere far away in a factory that we don't know. We know them very well. And of course, also as a consumer, you can check with every product sold for the H&M brand. You can check online who made it, which factory made it, and I think that's also part of our transparency goal to make it possible for customers to make a conscious choice, to see where a product is coming from. We don't. We think that's super important to build the trust with our customers.
Also, just building on that, Anna, because again, as a giant within the fashion industry, one of the biggest groups, and again, many people know H&M as the label H&M, but there is also Monkey, Weekday, there is Arket, other stories found that really is under the group. And for instance, there are differences, of course, at the positioning of all those different brands. So for instance, Arket, over there is a bigger transparency on what is exactly the factory where the garment is being made. But then also talking about the scale, it's produced in smaller batches than the traditional H&M brand as we know it. And I would like to build further on the innovation you were talking about, because you were piloting clothes that were made in a different way, such as like orange fiber. And we know that you're also working with a company in Germany that's called Selfie, and over there you're really looking into the secondhand sale. So how does that work? And is the goal also to have those solutions such as like secondhand sale and biomaterials that have been mentioned from Kim and also all the other panelists as a part of the strategy to get to your goals?
Yes, if you're talking about the innovative materials, orange fiber, as you mentioned, is made of the waste of the orange juice industry, and they were one of the winners of the Global Change Award. The Global Change Award is initiated by the H&M Foundation, the non-profit foundation supporting innovators with both funding, but also with a lot of support and introducing them to our supply chain, getting to know everyone we work with to see what is needed to scale your innovation. And I also want to mention that we have no rights to those innovations. So these winners are, of course, allowed to work with everyone in the industry. It's not specifically H&M that they should work with. Absolutely not. So yes, this is one of the examples, but it's also like the leather made of orange leaves or from grapes that we are experimenting with on a smaller scale. Yes, and also but the investment we've done with Selfie, this is a second-hand platform. It's now available in Sweden and Germany, as you mentioned, and there we invested as a company. But also one of our brands, COS, has launched their own resale platform. So yes, we try to offer our customers several ways to enjoy garments, and to make sure that once they don't want them anymore, or they grew out of it, or whatever, they can make sure that someone else is enjoying them.
Yeah, many thanks, Annette. We're all looking forward to seeing this as a mainstream, literally available in all the countries, ideally. And perhaps the next question's got to be a little bit challenging, because I would like to know what do you think are indeed the challenges, what's stopping companies to transition towards sustainability and circularity faster? And of course, in terms of H&M as a big brand, Annette, I would like to ask what is stopping or what is challenging for H&M? And on behalf of Signe, Sigmund, and Lotta, please feel free also to talk on a little bit more generic basis, but of course also on behalf of your brands.
Yes, well, I already mentioned it's partly our own systems that we have to adapt, but it's also the development time that is needed. We can't go any faster than we can at the moment, we think. Yes, of course, we do need that different supply chain that I was referring to. So we can't do it from one day on to the other, and we are speeding up because we see absolutely the need to. But this is the reality that we're facing today.
Many thanks for your input, Annette.
One thing I could maybe mention is firstly that I love the fact that here, because we have big brands here and then we have startups. And I love the fact that the startups here are not only textile brands, but also playing other roles in the value chain. So I think through collaborating with big brands, we can make a true change in the industry. So we have here Signe and Sigmund who are having an alternative way to produce clothing. And then there is me and Spinnova, and we are providing innovation in material. So what I wanted to say is that the circularity really makes a big difference, and I'm looking forward to seeing this change in the industry. So having circularity on the material level, and maybe apparel level, and then business model level. Hey, I was thinking one thing, Andrea. I see here a question about how is it possible that we make world's most innovative or world's most sustainable materials, and I was thinking I answered that quickly.
Yeah, please elaborate if you feel like it, Lotta. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All of us are curious to hear and learn more.
Yeah, because it's an industry that is decades and decades old, and then the industry hasn't seen so many disruptive innovations. There has been innovations, but more gradual innovations, such as using a little bit less chemicals in dissolving and these kind of things, but nothing really disruptive. And so how is it possible? What is this about? So very quickly on that, the industry uses a lot of chemicals. So for example, if we take the man-made cellulostics, the typical man-made cellulostic fiber process uses dissolving and chemicals. So what happens in the microscopic level is that the chemical composition of the fiber is broken down with dissolving and then regenerated again with another chemical cocktail so that it can form a strong bond and then strong fiber material. And then what we do, what happens in our process on the microscopic level is that we have a mechanical process. We do grinding and we use rheology. So we detach the micro-sized particles from each other, but we don't break them. So we detach them and then use, for example, temperature or pressure to create optimal conditions for the particles to form strong bonds, just like they would do in the nature. And these nature-made bonds make a very solid fiber and textile material.
Many thanks for explaining, Lotta. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't go into any more detail, but that's anybody who wants to learn more are free to visit our channels, because it's quite fascinating that how this type of innovation that is made elsewhere and now brought to textile industry, how could it make sense and make a big change in the CO2 emissions?
Absolutely. Also, as you mentioned, like it's lowering the CO2 emissions. It's also saving quite a lot of water, and especially it's literally utilizing the waste stream to create this fiber. So in the end, you also said it yourself before, this is when we're really talking about circular fibers. This is how to really avoid waste and get it back into production and create something new out of it. And also, many thanks for pointing out, indeed, that we do have this setup, that we have a large company, international company. We have a brand that is already very well established, as sustainable, pretty much like designed from the beginning. Then we have a brand that's really focusing on fairness and the conditions and started to really prove that it's possible. And then, of course, we have you representing materials, because we also thought it's quite easy to create a panel where you have 4 people who are pretty much like in the same shoes. Everyone has the same opinion. Everyone agrees. And over here, we wanted to also reach with this diversity in a panel in terms of like what different brands are being represented in size and also where's the focus, that everyone overall has a goal to be more sustainable and to create a sustainable pathway within the fashion. But indeed, everyone has a different focus and we need absolutely everyone on board to do that. I also want to hear from you, Signe and Sigmund. Can you tell us how actually you see this? What's stopping bigger companies to move towards the right direction at the speed we would like to see?
Maybe I can start?
Yeah.
I think a very simple answer is still the price points. It's not a secret that when we want to cover everything in a sustainable way, everything becomes more sustainable. When I want an organic wash label, it's more expensive. When I want a biodegradable bag instead of a plastic bag, it's more expensive. Everything in the process is more expensive when we want to cover it in a sustainable way. And when we, I mean, I can speak for myself and I can speak also for quite a large range of other brands that I'm working alongside. And most of us are compromising our own profit and our own margin because we are more driven by passion than the actual business fact. And I think this is true for a lot of people choosing to work with sustainable fashion, that something more goes into it than just the money. Because we are not working backwards. We are not designing a garment and defining the price and then going backwards and saying, okay, we can give this much to the producer, how much is left for everyone else, you know, in the process. Because someone is picking the cotton, for example, someone is making the yarn, someone is making the fabric, someone is dyeing it, someone is sending it, you know. We are asking everyone, what is your price? We're paying that. Then we have a price of a garment and we have to see how can we sell this to the consumers at a still kind of affordable price.
Many thanks. Yeah, Sigmund, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think what's stopping is, to be honest, willpower and fright, because it will have to change the way that you interact also with the consumer. And if you already have a huge market share, you want to change gradually in order not to suddenly, you know, disrupt the whole way that the company has been built up for years. But for me, it was shockingly easy to have good working conditions, because it was really about defining what do we mean and what will that cost. Exactly how Signe is putting it. Firstly, what will it cost to have these working conditions that is our standard? And then, okay, what will that mean for the price point out to consumer? So yeah, for me, it was shockingly easy. And with all the talent that all these big brands have in terms of marketing and developing garments and all of that, which is, for me at least, the hard part. If they have enough talent to do all of that, they do have enough talent also to create good working conditions for the people producing the garments. And I have no background from the garment industry whatsoever. I'm a dancer, and if I can do it, they can do it.
Many thanks for those insights, Sigmund. Yeah, so I would say, looking at a timeline, wow, what a discussion. And indeed, it's not easy sometimes to merge all the different points of views, but I think I can very safely conclude all of us are having the same vision. We know that better fashion needs to happen. We know that that change is definitely coming, and we have to do our best to speed it up as much as we can and as much as we have to as well, because indeed, Sigmund, as you said, sometimes it's also about leadership and bold decision. However, also listening to you on it, it's very, very clear that being a big brand that has quite a complex operation set up for so many years, not everything is possible to change from one day to another. Collaboration will be absolutely crucial, but we have to also think about how can we change the consumption patterns. It should stop being about every day looking differently and really focusing on how to get something that's going to be with me, that I'm going to be very proud to rewear. So really wearing our values and having still Kim actually with us, I would like to ask you, Kim, do you maybe have some concluding remarks? What did you think of the conversation?
Wow, that's a hard one.
I know, but you can manage that. I know that too.
Well, I think it's absolutely important and wonderful that all of you are working on what we call multiple value creation, you know. So I see the struggle of the smaller brands to get the sales done. And at the same time, you're part of a social movement, right? So I've seen many entrepreneurs also, you know, go bankrupt in the end, but still they're part of a movement. Their work and their efforts are making a true impact on the whole world. So Annette is kind of safe, but the smaller brands, you know, keep up the good work. Don't work too hard. I know that you're sacrificing a lot of your time and efforts. So take care of yourself as well in this whole process. So that's just my advice.
Yeah, this is just a wonderful conclusion, because indeed, unless we are safe and healthy and strong, it's difficult to start helping the others. Many thanks, Kim. And I also want to say thank you so much for a productive discussion that's been happening in a chat. There are quite a lot of people who are busy with the fashion, people who are busy with sustainability, people who are mentioning that they're launching their brands, they're trying to do something within the fashion and lend their hands to push this transition forward. So many thanks everyone listening. And I would say, without further ado, back to you, Kirsten.